Hello, and welcome back to the Creating Individualized and Group Learning Paths Part 4 of the Blackboard Black Belt course. In the last video, we discussed how to set up predefined learning paths via learning modules. Learning modules are a fantastic tool for when you'd like the entire class to progress through a series of content items. However, this isn't the only way to accomplish this. In this video, we will be exploring how to use adaptive release and test availability exceptions to create individualized learning paths for your students. Just like learning modules, adaptive release allows instructors to release content items on Blackboard only after a certain criteria have been met. For example, let's say that you would like for your students to read the syllabus and then take a short test over the content. But you only want the test to be available to the students after they have marked the syllabus as reviewed. To accomplish this, we would use adaptive release. Let's begin by clicking on the Options menu for the content item that you would like to add adaptive release to. From here, you can see that we have two adaptive release options: Adaptive Release and Adaptive Release Advanced. If you want to set up a single rule, as we do here, you can use the basic adaptive release. Adaptive Release Advanced is reserved for multiple rules, which we will get into in a later video. From here, let's click on Adaptive Release. Here we will see that our first options are to revise the date. This allows the instructor to set the availability for the content item. Setting the date criteria for this item will restrict the date and times of visibility. A quick tip on setting the date options in adaptive release. If you've already set the availability date options in the content item, those settings will override these adaptive release date settings. It's really best to use one or the other, but not both. Next, we have the Membership Options area where we can restrict the viewing of this content item to a specific student or group of students. Clicking on the Browse button allows you to search for the student that you would like to make this content item available to. Keep in mind that if you select multiple rule criteria on this page, all of the rule criteria must be met before the item becomes available. So for example, if I were to set the date restrictions above and the membership restrictions in this section to only include student A, then only student A would be able to see this item between these dates. We can also release this item to a student or all students based on their performance on a different Grade Center item. Finally, we can make certain items available for students after they've marked a different item as reviewed. This is a great way for instructors to force sequential viewing on items within their course without using learning modules, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. We want the syllabus test to only become available to the students after they have read the syllabus and marked it reviewed. So to accomplish this, simply click on the Browse button here and then find the item that you want the students to mark as reviewed before they are able to view the current item. So in this case, we are looking for the syllabus. After you have found the item, you can click Submit. You will notice that Blackboard gives you this pop-up message saying that this section will turn on review for the selected item. Click the OK button. Let's go into Student Preview mode to view the results. I will navigate to the content area where the syllabus and syllabus test are displayed. We can see that just as the pop-up message told us, our syllabus now has a marked review button located underneath it. When we check it as reviewed, the syllabus test appears. This is just what we want. Now that you know how to use adaptive release, I'm going to demonstrate a common issue that instructors frequently find themselves in. Let's say that you have an assignment set up with a due date and the availability date options set. You want the students to only be able to see the assignment during the week that it is due because you really don't want students submitting the assignment late. However, you received an email from one of the students the week before the assignment informing you that they had a family emergency and will be out of town for the next week. Therefore, they won't be able to complete any work in your course this coming week. Your student is asking for an extra week to be able to complete the assignment. To extend the availability date for this student, many instructors want to use the adaptive release. They begin by clicking the Assignment Options menu and select Adaptive Release. Then they simply extend the display until date for an extra week. Next, under Membership, they select the specific student. When the instructor clicks the Submit button, they see this pop-up message informing them that this item has a date. What Blackboard is trying to tell us is that the availability dates that were set in the assignment settings when creating the assignment are actually going to override this adaptive release rule. So basically, this adaptive release rule will not work like the instructor intends. The date availability settings found in the actual assignment will always override any adaptive release rules. If you set up an adaptive release rule like this with the intention of allowing a student extra time on assignment, you would actually need to wait until the original availability date has ended. Then go into the assignment and remove the limited availability settings and set up the adaptive release rule. However, this is a very confusing way to accomplish this. There is a much easier way. Let me show you how to do this with Adaptive Release Advanced. Let's first begin by removing the availability options in the assignment and click Submit. Remember, it's best to use the availability options in either the content item settings or by using Adaptive Release, but not both. Now that we have removed the availability restrictions for the assignment, we can click on Adaptive Release Advanced in the Items Options menu. From here, you can create rules and delete rules. This is also where you'd go if you created a rule using the basic adaptive release but need to delete it later. You can see that we don't have any rules set up yet. Let's create a rule. First, we need to create a rule that limits the availability of this assignment for the entire class. Then we will be setting up an additional rule for the one student that needs the extra week. So to begin, click on Create Rule button, then name your rule. Now that we have the rule created, let's create criteria for this rule. You can see that we have all the same options that we had for the basic adaptive release. They are just organized differently. For this demonstration, we want to choose Date and then set the availability options for the entire class. We are going to give them this entire week to complete this assignment. After you've set the date options, click Submit. Now we see that we have one criterion set for the entire class. We can add additional criteria to this rule if we would like, although we don't want to do that for this demonstration. Instead, we want to create a new rule. To do this, simply repeat the steps that you did for the first step. Click Create Rule, name the rule appropriately, click Submit, click Create Criteria and choose Date, and set an extra week's availability. Click Submit. Now we want to add an additional criterion to this rule because we want this rule to only apply to one student. To do this, click on the Create Criteria button and choose Membership. Find the student that needs the extra time and click Submit. Back at the Extra Week Rule page, we can see that this rule will be applied during a specific date and for only this one specific user. This is exactly what we want. If we click OK, we will see that we have two rules that will run for this assignment. An entire class rule that limits the availability of the assignment for the entire class, or a rule that limits the availability dates for the specific student. Clicking OK sets the rules for this assignment. One thing to keep in mind about adaptive release is that rule criteria adds AND statements. So all criteria for a rule must be met before the rule will run. Adding more than one rule through Adaptive Release Advanced adds OR statements. So if you have multiple rules, Adaptive Release will run if any of these rules are met. There are multiple pages on our online knowledge base to help you with the adaptive release if you need assistance. Now that we've covered adaptive release, I'd like to remind you that you don't need to use adaptive release if you'd like to set individual options for a test. For example, if the above scenario happens and the student needed extra time on a test instead of on an assignment, then you could simply use the test availability exception options in the test options instead of having to set multiple rules in adaptive release. To do this, click on the Options menu next to the test. Then, choose the Edit Test options. Scroll down to Test Availability Exceptions. Click on the Add User or Group button. Then, find your student. Next, set the desired options. This is also a great place to set timer exceptions for students who need extra time on tests. After you've set the test availability exceptions like you want, simply click the Submit button and you're finished. This is much easier than going through Adaptive Release Advanced. Keep in mind that this is only an option for tests. You will have to use adaptive release for all other content item exceptions. We are getting to the end of this video course, but before we conclude, let's take a moment to review some of our best practices for creating individualized and group learning paths. First, students cannot unenroll themselves from groups even if the self-enrollment option is on. The instructor must unenroll students from groups. Second, only one member of a group should submit group assignments. Make sure that either you or the group designates a specific student to submit the assignments. Third, learning modules are a great way to enforce sequential viewing for Blackboard content. Fourth, adaptive release criteria, setup, and statements. Multiple adaptive release rules or adaptive release advanced sets up or statements. And fifth, test availability exceptions can only be used for tests. Well, that's it for the final video in Creating Individualized and Group Learning Paths course. Don't forget to take the quiz. You're going to need 100% on the quiz to pass, but don't worry, you'll have as many attempts as you need. Thanks for watching. See you soon in the Monitoring Student Activity and Performance section of the Black Belt course.